Joining us live tonight with their reaction is former mammal trainer Phil Demers, along with a marine mammal scientist at the Animal Welfare Institute, Naomi Rose. Phil, first to you, this charge is being described by lawyers as a technical charge, not an animal cruelty charge per se. What do you take from this?
I mean, the big win today is that the government, and rather the police, are recognizing the criminal aspect of Marineland's existence.
Phil, can you describe the pressures being placed on Marineland right now? We know the government has been investigating concerns about the water quality at the park, and that was years ago.
Marineland is now under the pressure of the police, the federal government, the provincial government, the municipal government, the community, activists, NGOs. Basically, they are surrounded with everybody who is insisting on their change, and their defiance at this point is proving futile over the past decade.
Yeah, and so many developments over the last decade, if not longer. Naomi, has public opinion changed on parks like Marineland?
Oh, yes. The Blackfish effect from the documentary Blackfish that came out in 2013 is very real. I've measured it globally.
Yeah, and we know Marineland will be in court mid-February on this charge from back in August. But Naomi, where do we go from here in terms of, again, both the court of public opinion and what happens next? Work from home and virtual workforces were pandemic staples, and then this autumn, many organizations were moving forward with a slow return to the office. That was until the emergence of Omicron. On Monday, the city of Toronto canceled plans for its employees to return to their offices. Members of the Ontario Public Service, who have been gradually returning to their offices since November, were told that plan is now on hold until February. And Toronto's financial district is also following suit. So what does this mean for employers? What does this mean for workers? Should employers still be asking employees to come back? And as a worker, do you have to? What are your rights? Here to break this all down are employment lawyer Daniel Lublin, partner at Witten and Lublin, David Zweig, associate professor of organizational behavior and human resources management at the University of Toronto, and Andrew Caldwell, HR advisory manager at Peninsula Human Resources and Health and Safety Consulting Firm for small businesses. Thank you all for joining us tonight. Andrew, let's start with you as someone who advises employers and small businesses on best practices. What do you advise?
Well, right now it's what can you do? What can you afford? You're not actually instructed to have your employees work from home. It's suggested.
And when it comes to the legality of all this, Daniel, legally, what are an employee's rights? If they don't feel safe, do they have to return to work?
Thanks for having me. Good evening. I don't disagree with what Andrew said. In fact, I agree with it. If a workplace is safe, yes, an employee has to return. And this we saw a lot of at the beginning of the pandemic, where employees complained.
So, David, for organizations that were rolling out a gradual return to the office plan, what does delaying that plan do for productivity, or do things really remain status quo at this point?
Well, we plan and COVID laughs. So even though we made plans to return to the workplace, obviously Omicron has thrown a wrench into all of those plans.
David, also for employees who were anticipating the return to the office, to be around people socially, to get out of the house, what's the mental impact of all this? And what will that mean for their productivity at home in terms of pandemic work from home fatigue?
I think we all know that, we've all been struggling with adapting to the situation that we've been in for almost 2 years now.
Andrew, over to you. I know we've been talking a little bit about this throughout the pandemic, but a lot of people have been arguing in the same way that we've seen situations with restrictions, people saying who are against working from home, saying this is going to be the new norm, not necessarily forever, but for a very long time. What do you think this looks like in terms of a short and long-term timeline, this work from home trend that we're obviously seeing and we've been seeing for more than 18 months?
I think we're in the spot where we are still seeing that trend. It is still happening. We're looking at more hybrid work environments where those who can work from home will be able to, or a kind of a hotel desk situation where those who feel like they need to come in, or you come in once a week and then you go home.
Daniel, over to you. Can an employer tell an employee not to go to sporting events or large events in general, for that matter?
In my opinion, as long as the government is allowing the sporting events, is allowing concerts, even if it's at half capacity, is allowing restaurants to stay open, an employer shouldn't and can't be saying, you can't attend.
The Canadian Blood Services is now asking Health Canada to remove a ban that did not allow gay and bisexual men, as well as some other members of the LGBTQ2S+, to donate blood. Instead, Canadian Blood Services would ask all donors, regardless of their sexual orientation, if they've engaged in higher risk sexual activities. The move is one that the organization says would allow more equity for donors while ensuring a safe blood supply. Joining us live to talk about the possible change in the organization's policy is the executive director of the Alliance for South Asian AIDS Prevention, Pranay Anand, along with the OHTN Endgame Chair in Gay and Bisexual Men's Health, David Brennan. Both of you, thanks for joining us tonight. First to you, David, this is a policy that's had a long and controversial history with the Canadian Blood Services. What do you think this application that the organization has submitted means for the LGBTQ2S+ community?
Well, I think it's fantastic news, Mark. Thank you. I am, have long been an advocate for ensuring that the blood donation policy reflects science and not bias.
And Pranay, I know the change would still allow the organization to ask donors if they've engaged in, quote, higher risk sexual activities. Do you think this move goes far enough in representing the people impacted?
I think it does, because as we've talked about so many times, it was specifically targeting gay men.
And David, should the move have happened sooner in terms of a timeline here?
It's hard for me to say. I wish it had happened sooner, quite frankly. The evidence behind all this could have been gathered sooner and could have been done sooner.
And Pranay, I know this is something that has a long controversial history, but take us back to why this was put in place in the first place.
The fear and anxiety of not knowing. I mean, it takes us back to the AIDS crisis back in the 80s, right? Like, we don't know what's going on in the community. These groups of people, their blood is tainted. They engage in high-risk activities, and as a result, let's ban this entire group of people. And so, rightly, David, you mentioned about homophobia and transphobia, and just like being so afraid of the unknown that it was highly discriminatory to pick a group of people and say, no, not you. Just because you're part of that community, just because you identify as gay or you're a man who has sex with men, no, not you, not your blood. And that's just, in my opinion, cherry picking and just highly discriminatory is what I think it is. Yeah.
David, to you, what would removing the ban mean for removing the stigma surrounding gay men and HIV?
Well, I think it's hard to know exactly, because I think, quite frankly, the stigma of homophobia runs deeper than I think a lot of Canada wants to admit.
We'll have to leave it there and see what happens next. Pranay Anand, David Brennan, thank you both so much for your input tonight.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Thanks for having us. Thanks.